Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast for the Love of Books. I'm Sara Erdner, your host. Today on the podcast, I chat with Dr. Sara Erdner, who wrote a book called Dear Coach. This is a book of letters from athletes to coaches, and it's things they wish they could have told them. I loved this book so much. I know I say that a lot, but I just really think this is a very important book. Honestly, I think that every coach should read this. I think there are lots of perspectives to have between coaches and athletes, and I think this is a great balance. After you listen to our interview, I encourage you to go order her book, especially if you're a coach or you know a coach. They will be encouraged by this book, I promise. So I thank you for being here today. Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I have so many things I want to say about your book. I loved it. I absolutely
Mm,
loved it. And I just had so many thoughts. I was kind of spouting stuff off to my husband last night, just thinking it all through because in the beginning, I'm going to get you to talk about it, but I loved it. And I know I say that a lot, but I will not promote a book on this podcast that I do not like or feel
mm,
like I can. Um, when I saw it, in the front, it says, "What I wish I could have told you," it's letters to coaches. And I thought, well, that is so sweet. Like, that's so nice that, these athletes are writing letters to their coaches. And that's so nice. And in the beginning, that's what it was. It was so sweet. And then, then I realized I didn't pay close attention to the first part that said the good. And then I got to the not so good. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that aspect of it. And then it was not so sweet. I mean, it was real, very real and very
mhm,
honest. But I honestly think every coach needs to read this book
mhm.
because there's just so much I want to say. I'm not even letting you talk yet.
Yeah.
There's two different sides of all of it. The coach can't be everything to everybody, but at the same time, they need to recognize the importance of the relationship of that coach and athlete. And I think sometimes they forget. I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. This book
No,
was really important to me.
I
And
love
I
that.
think I think coaches need to realize that, that relationship, how important it is. They need to be reminded, but they also need to be reminded of how special they are. Like the
Yes.
letters in the beginning, gosh, so important, so important. So I'm going to let you talk now because that's
Yeah.
why you're here. But tell everybody why you wrote the book and what it's about.
Yeah, well, before I get into that, something I want to highlight on what you said that really, my favorite quote is a book read by 1,000 different people is 1,000 different books.
Yeah.
And your perspective, like when you read the front, you're like, oh, this is so sweet. It
Yes.
sounds like you assumed you were going to get into it. And it's going to be all these lovely, lovely
Yes.
letters with only positive feedback.
Yeah.
My assumption, actually, when I started this research journey, was I was only going to get not so great letters or more constructive letters. So
Right.
when I got the thank you letters, I was like, oh, this is actually interesting. And I think it speaks to the depth
Right.
of how much we're not communicating, even on the good side of things. So
Yeah.
in my bachelor's degree, my master's degree are in communication studies with a concentration in interpersonal communication. So
Yeah.
really the deeper theme here is bringing in better communication so that we can f- it, we can mitigate the maladaptive power structures that are there often within the coach-athlete relationship. But I started this research. I was always interested in just relationships in general, the communication component. When I got into my PhD with for sports psychology and motor behavior, I was started interviewing coaches, and I would interview them. I would click the stop recording, and there was always these like conversations at the very end, like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I loved this topic, but I'd really like to know what athletes think." And I was like, "Yeah, honestly, that's what I would like to do too."
Right.
There was access issues to athletes. They're more protected, obviously. They're
Mm-hmm.
a vulnerable population. But I was like, you know what? I don't want to look back and regret not doing what I want to do and just going the easy route. So even if this
Yeah.
means tacking on an extra semester to my PhD, got the approval from my mentors to do so, and that's when my dissertation shifted to going and getting access to athletes themselves and what I thought was going to be 60 to 90-minute interviews, which is what I put in my IRB, and it's what I told the athletes. It was 2 to 3 hour conversations. And
Wow.
I really felt like I hit this untapped market because
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure, the athletes go and they complain to their, there's like cathartic complaining to their teammates, maybe the assistant coach, their families, but for me as a neutral party, they'd never
Right.
met me before, coming in saying, share your story. And I also let them know, I was like, hey, obviously I'm going to do this as research, but I do want to put this in a book. I really do want to
Yeah.
promote it and get it out to the public. There's a massive gap between academic research and then there's that paywall. So a lot of this really powerful information in research journals don't actually get out to the general
Yeah.
public. Um, so I'm a little bit of a rebel in the academic
Yeah.
space. Decided instead of spending the 3, 4, 5 years to publish this in research journals, I just went straight to finding a publisher and
Yeah.
transitioning the research into this book format. And that took 3 years from
Wow.
to transfer it into a book form. Started working with an editor, and it was kind of comical. Amanda and I had a great relationship because I mean, I'd grown up writing in the academic space. So
Yeah.
she was very much like, okay, she taught me
Right.
a lot of like, okay, this is too academic. We need
Yeah.
and I'm really grateful to her for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was like, gosh, felt like 30 different drafts of the book, and this
Wow.
is the final product. And as with at the core of who I am, I'm an artist, so I'm a musician and
Mhm.
a painter, and it's writing a book's very artistic in its own right. So there came a point where I was like, okay, we have to just click submit. Like we can't,
Right.
you can. So there's even
Yeah.
things in the book, like one thing I would probably change now looking back is the part two called the not so good letters. They're still good letters. And I
Oh
wish I
yeah,
maybe
they're
would have
good
called,
letters.
yeah, I wish I would have maybe called them something else, but I think the general audience kind of gets the gist of what I
Oh
was trying to
yeah.
get at. Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of surprised me because when I pick up a book to read, I don't read the back. Like I don't, I
Mm.
just start reading. So I did,
Yeah.
maybe on the back it might give you a warning or something, but I didn't expect it. And so it just kind of surprised me. And I cried in some of those. I mean,
Mm.
they're just very honest and they're very
Yeah.
real. And I think people will be able to relate to them. I
Yeah.
told you in my first email, I think my dad was a coach growing up. And so, he wasn't ever my coach, and I'm sure he was a great coach, but I saw how much he loved his kids. And we
Yeah.
had athletes at my house my whole life. I mean, they were always hanging out and he just cared about them and I knew that was one reason I wanted to read this because I thought that's so sweet. I know, how special those are. So I really do think it doesn't matter if you're coaching pee-wee football or up to college. I think coaches need to read this book. It's just
Yeah.
very good. And I loved that, the chapters weren't very long. Each letter was not super long, so it's not like it's going to take you forever to sit down and read a chapter or something. You can do it, a little at a time. But I loved it. I really did.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
was it like reading those letters for the first time when they started coming in?
I'll be honest, I remember I was already in therapy. I've been in therapy for years. So I'm definitely somebody who walks the talk. Barbara, love my therapist. She's great. But I remember going into therapy and one of the things I didn't expect doing this project, um, was the weight that I would hold with it. So of course the
Yeah,
thank you letters, you get those. And they're wonderful to read, very uplifting. But when I had people started coming out of the woodwork, it was almost like the word got out. I started receiving unsolicited letters, just like I'd get an email from somebody like, hey, so and so told me about this. I was inspired to write my own letter. I wanted to share it with you.
wow,
And if you would like to add it. And that also let me know like the depth in which athletes don't feel heard within the
right,
athletic space. It was very heavy, so I had to start kind of shift gears in therapy, talking about one subject to be like, hey, I
yeah,
really need to actually process the trauma, the residual trauma that
yeah,
I'm holding on to of some of these stories, and the pressure I felt to want to do justice by them as well.
yeah,
Some of especially the more constructive letters, there was some coaching involved, so I would get them, and I mean, if you can imagine, they were just kind of like, "You suck, I hated you," So I was
right,
like, "That's valid, I hear you,"
right,
and I just had to kind of position them to say, "This is the purpose of the book, and I really want it to be educational," and so
right,
think about what I would do. I would get those letters, and I would say, situate yourself like you're standing in front of a group of coaches and you're using your lived experience with your coach and saying, this is what my coach did and what I wish they would have done. So give them
Right.
practical examples. Like,
Yeah.
here's specifically what the coach did, and this is what I would have rather done. So they would
Yeah.
send me a new draft, and it was just exponentially more meaty. So I wasn't telling them
Yeah.
what to say. I was just
Yeah.
saying, hey, like, think the people reading this, the primary audience is coaches, but there's going to be other people reading it. How can
Yeah.
we use so that me quote unquote coaching them or really kind of pulling more out of them was also, I didn't expect that being a therapeutic process. A lot of them said they were
I
like,
bet.
we needed to do this for ourselves. We didn't realize how much we were still holding on
Oh,
to
I
this
bet.
stuff. So that was
Yeah.
also really beneficial and made me feel like if this book does nothing else but help these handful of athletes feel
Yeah.
seen and heard, then I've accomplished my goal, really.
Yeah. So you had like what, 30 letters in there, around
I believe
30?
so, yeah.
Did you have a whole lot more than that were sent to you, or did you just request that many?
No, I had more sent. I mean, there were, again, I started getting unsolicited letters, and that was really hard to like know, because with my publisher, I had kind of a page count,
Right.
and so do you know, multiple drafts of this book happened, and in the beginning, this kind of profound kind of aha moment I had. The beginning of the book only had 10 letters, and they were
Oh,
all
wow.
constructive letters. And what I did is I gave a letter, and then I came in after and gave my 2 cents. So I basically told the reader what they should get out of the letter, and I had all this research support for it. And I'm
Yeah.
teaching a methods of coaching class in front of some students, and I'm telling them we're talking about the lesson, the coach-athlete relationship, and I'm telling them about them shutting up more and situating the athlete voice more. And as I'm telling them this, I just have this massive aha moment in my head, and I think the students thought I had a mental breakdown, and they were like, and I just like stop in the middle of teaching. I'm just like staring blankly at the back wall, and I
Yeah.
go, you all go to the discussion questions at the end of the chapter, discuss in your small groups. I need to step out for a second. So I stepped out. I called Amanda, my editor, and I was like, I know this is going to cost me more money because it's more time I'm paying you to do this. And I said, but I'm realizing I need to gather more letters. And I had more letters actually. I had just chosen the top 10. And
Right.
what I realized in that moment is I was actually doing the opposite of what I was teaching the students to do as future coaches. Like I needed to shut up more in the book and gather more stories.
Yeah.
And that's when, again, a book read by 1,000 different people is 1,000 different books.
Right.
So I transitioned to bringing more letters in, sectioning it off into 3 parts. And at the end of each letter,
Yeah.
as you know, there's journal prompts.
Yeah.
So it's inviting you, the reader, in. How does your lived experience interact with the letter? What do you gather out of it? The rendition of the book now is that I shut up more. I realized I wasn't walking the talk. Like here I was
Right.
actually perpetuating the same problem that I feel like coaches are doing, which is,
Yeah.
they're dictating to the athlete what they should do, how they should act. And I was like, ooh, yikes. So the beauty in writing the book was my own learning process and really
Yeah.
to um submitting uh to that and me also learning, right? Like being open. And I,
Yeah.
I share this story to say, hey, like, use myself hopefully as an example of the humility needed to be like, yikes, I started out
Yeah.
actually doing what I'm teaching coaches hopefully not to do and was able to make the shift into
Yeah.
inviting people in. The cultural shift that I want to make this is a marathon we're running,
Right.
I
Right.
agree with you. I would like every coach to read this. I would love
Yes.
for this to be a part of every coaching education material out there, and not just for selfish professional gain, but
Right.
to start a movement to change
Right.
sport, in more relational ways to create more
Mhm.
psychological safety. So, and that's going to take more than just me. dictating to
Right.
people what the truth with a
Yeah.
capital T is. It is going to take a lot of people
Yeah.
around a round table with their lived experiences, informing policy changes, informing education.
Yeah. I loved, the second part of the letters, the not so good letters. Um, how a lot of those who became coaches talked about how they did things differently, how they did things the way things had been done for them, which I thought was great. I mean, that's a start right there. But I loved this so much. How did you go about selecting the letters? Was it just ones that moved you, or did you have a process in picking them out?
Yeah, I think selecting the letters was more of what, and some of that was my own. There's no way to get bias out of that. From my experience
Right.
in sport personally, but also professionally as a mental performance consultant, it
Yeah.
was the letters that I felt like this one letter I felt like represented multiple stories of other athletes I had
Right.
encountered at the professional level, at the Olympic level, at the collegiate level, and even some at the
Yeah.
youth level. I'm not necessarily experienced in youth, but I have worked with some youth athletes. And so when I would
Yeah.
choose a letter, I tried choosing them to think, okay, I feel like this letter also represents so many others. Um, and so that in
Yeah.
and of itself has its limitations because it's, me choosing. Um, and when I had the athletes that, I would send them kind of that confidentiality, informed consent stuff, it kind of let them know, like, your letter may or may not be chosen.
Right.
But I still worked with them on crafting their letters. So that was definitely challenging to do. But the ultimate goal was how can we try to capture a multitude of lived experiences, especially.
Right.
So there were some letters that they were kind of similar experiences. So it was like, well, if I put these, it felt redundant type of a thing.
Right. Right. How can coaches, if there's a coach listening and maybe they haven't read the book yet, but how can they recognize if they are unintentionally contributing to this communication breakdown where, I mean, that's part of the problem. How can they, if it's unintentional, and how can they even recognize it?
Yeah, I think so. Part three is where I come in and I say,
Yes.
hello, it's
You're
me
very
again.
honest. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
I offer my Dear Coach letter.
Right.
That of course it's confidential in the sense of people know it's written by me, but I try to
Right.
take out identifying information not to
Yeah.
out a particular coach. And I also wrote it in a cumulative manner, meaning that I didn't write it about one specific coach. I wrote it about a
Right.
multitude of experiences across all the coaches I've had. Now,
Yeah.
the some of the interventions that I give on like what can you do now in your own
Yeah.
kind of vulnerable space is if you were a coach, then you have some experience in sport. You were an athlete at some point,
Right.
to whatever level that was. So you have your own Dear Coach letter. So
Hmm.
let's write that letter. So step one is write your own Dear Coach letter. And then
Yeah.
step two is a little bit more vulnerable. Step one's vulnerable, but let's turn up the vulnerability meter a little bit when
Yeah.
we get into step two. Reread that letter to you as if it was written to you by an athlete, either that was under your
Yeah.
care or currently under your care. And I have had a lot of aha moments in workshops I've
Mm.
done of coaches being like, uh-oh. And some of it is like you don't actually realize you're enacting the same behavior as your former coach. And the reason why
Right.
is because you've masked it as something different.
Yeah.
So, as an example, you might not punish your athletes with running. You might not be like, get on the line, you didn't meet
Right.
the 5 out of 10 layup. Um, but you might be yelling at them in the timeout circle, right? Like
Yeah.
it might shift. So you might be thinking, I'm not like my old coach. I'm not making my athletes do this specific thing. But because you haven't actually processed the trauma around that, it's really
Right.
just morphed into something different. And so it's trying to create also a psychologically safe space for coaches to say, it's okay. Step one is awareness. So
Right.
in this circle, making sure that when you do this activity, there's no shame, there's no should to, have to, ought to. It's
Right.
very like we have to have we have to swallow the really hard pills in order to make the change that you do want to see. And so
Yeah.
the aha moment of, and then within step two, once you do reread the letter, go through and highlight things that maybe you're like, I am actually doing that. It just looks different. Or also circle things that you're like, oh, this is something my coach did that I loved and I forgot about and I would love to implement. Um, in step two of rereading the letter back to yourself,
Hmm.
the coach is highlighting, circling, starring things that they're like, yeah, I'm realizing I actually am doing that. It just looks different. Or
Yeah.
there's been aha moments of like, oh, I forgot my coach did this and I actually loved it that they did it. How can I start actually applying that? I'm not actually doing that currently. And then
Yeah.
maybe even in making a list of things you should keep doing. Maybe there's things you're like, oh, yep, I'm already doing that. Maybe even dialing up the volume on that a little bit and finding new ways to sprinkle it in. And so
Yeah.
that's been really fun to see coaches when they truly are open to making change. Because,
Yeah.
there's some coaches that, I mean, you can go on the Amazon reviews, for example, and there's some
Right.
people that the people who really need the book don't like the book, Not
Well,
always,
yeah.
but
I was going to ask if you had gotten any response from coaches
I have.
that have read it.
There's coaches that love it, similar to you. There's
Good.
also, and the coaches that don't like it don't necessarily tell me to my face, but
Right.
you can go grab some popcorn and read the reviews. I mean, I sometimes if I just want a good laugh, and I mean, if
Oh
there's constructive
gosh.
criticism, I obviously take it. I'm not,
Right.
but there's definitely, but I'm actually proud of that.
Yeah.
To me, my art as an artist, if I am writing things that really strike a chord, I'm doing
Yeah.
it right. If I'm creating a painting or writing music or writing books that either get 1 stars or 5 stars, I'm doing it right. Because
Yeah.
I feel like if you're writing something that's just middle of the road, that's not really leaning into what needs to be said, then
Yeah.
the power's not there. Um, so in a way, I'm grateful to those 1 star reviews
Yeah.
because I'm like, okay, this really, to me, affirms, like it's either going to
Sure.
strike a chord of inspiration of change or it's going to trigger people and
Yeah.
they're going to get a little, defensive, if you will. And,
Yeah.
I still send empathy to those people and, maybe one of these days there'll be some kind of, I do believe people can change even,
Absolutely.
in the very
Absolutely.
end. Yeah.
Have you heard back from any of the athletes that submitted letters since the book came out or
Yeah, some of them follow me on social media and
yeah.
they're seeing, so kind of a fun little side story. I had to take 2.5 years off, almost 3 years off from promoting the book,
Oh wow.
because I just had a transplant surgery five and a
Oh.
half months ago.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, it's a auto transplant. They relocated my left kidney to my lower right
Oh
abdomen. So
my goodness.
I have both my kidneys on my right side. So
Wow.
again, I took a pretty long hiatus. My health
Yes.
was not doing very well. So now that I've
Yeah.
gotten back on the train a couple months ago, they'll see me post things and they'll
Yeah.
comment on them or send me a direct message and be like,
Yeah.
oh, this is so good to see this back out there. They
Yes.
see the reviews and they just feel, I felt very guilty those 3 years. Obviously, I needed to take care of myself and people
Oh sure.
understood. But, I care about these stories.
Yeah.
I care about promoting them. So it feels really good to be back on the train and
Yeah.
they know that my heart is right. So I think it's been therapeutic for them to be like, okay, cool. Like our
Yeah.
stories are still making waves.
That's awesome. I love that. Are you going to do another book?
I actually started writing the second book prior to getting sick.
Good.
Yeah, and
Good.
it was geared towards sport parents, and
Okay.
because there is
Ooh.
so little education. Yeah, my
Oh.
master's thesis was actually on parent communication, and student athlete self-efficacy, and I was
Wow.
very and it made when I submitted it for journal publication, the editor even reached out specifically and was like, "We need more research on this.
Wow.
There's not enough parent education in sport." And then I shifted to the coach-athlete relationship because of my mentor in my
Yeah.
PhD. With that being said, I really do. The book two, the parent book, is kind of the sister book of this.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of same format letters,
Yeah.
dear mom, dear dad, dear guardian, like this is what I wish I would have told you but never did. And
Wow.
seeing, twofold, kind of seeing how they differ from the coach letters,
Yeah.
and really just providing some general guidance to parents on how to
Mhm.
navigate that relationship, because I think parents, I have a truth bias about people, or
Mhm.
trust bias. I just really feel like people are trying to do good, and if
Yeah.
they are causing harm, it's not intentional. They don't know better, and until they do know better, and I think with parents, there's so little education out there that they're just flying by the seat of their
Yeah.
pants.
I don't know when all the like travel sports and the competitive, all this stuff that was extracurricular, when all that started, like what years it started. But that's a whole group of people, decades of people that have lived through that. So I can totally see all those
Yep,
letters. Oh,
yep,
my goodness.
yeah.
So if you could say anything to any coach or any athlete right now, what kind of encouragement could you bring to both sides?
I think I would like to highlight the concept of empathy here, specific from athletes, sure, but not in a like minimizing the trauma they might be experiencing by the hands of the coach. Like, we'll just empathize with them. But I
Right.
think empathy across all stakeholders. So what I mean by that, one of the things I really promote in the book is coach mental health initiatives. I fear, I mean, coaches are such forgotten souls. I mean, they're really like, as long as you're winning, we care, but if you're not, so they're very much treated as a means to an end rather than just
Yeah.
a human being. And I think that so many, when you read between the lines of all these letters,
Yeah.
it's a trickle down effect. So if we don't have mentally healthy coaches,
Right.
coaches that feel psychologically safe with themselves and thus they know how to create psychological safety for others, then those athlete mental health initiatives are just a band-aid approach. And so
Yeah.
if we really, and it's not to say let's get rid of those and replace it with coach mental health initiatives, but we have to take a multi-directional approach to athlete mental health, and coaches are a factor there. So coaches being mentally healthier is a means to an end, which will
Right.
affect athletes' mental health, but also just in and of themselves. Coach burnout is a huge, huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these coaches aren't getting paid. Most of them
Right.
aren't getting paid for the amount of work they have to put in.
Yeah.
They're having to sacrifice time with their families in order to retain their job, to, get the win-loss. So I think not only coach mental health initiatives, but us revisiting, taking an empathic approach to hiring, retention, and firing processes for
Yeah.
coaches. So taking into consideration, like, what are the measures for hiring and retaining and firing, and how can we implement psychological safety measures? How can we implement the
Yeah.
athlete's voice there? Um, and I think doing these things, making this cultural shift that I'm asking for in sport is an empathic one. It's one where it's saying, let's really view all stakeholders and how we can best support them as human beings first.
Yeah.
And obviously that'll have a trickle down effect as well.
Yeah. That's so good. I am going to recommend this to every coach that I know,
I
to
love
everybody that I
that.
know. I'm going to put it on my personal social medias also. But it really moved to me. And if you listen to any of my interviews with any authors, I believe in the people that I talk to. I will not have somebody on here that I don't believe in what they're doing. I want to promote them. I am for them. Like, I get excited. But this was really special. This was a very
Yeah,
special book, and I really did. I loved it, and I thank you for writing it. Is there
yeah.
anything that I did not ask you about that you want to tell me about?
I think one of the things I do want to mention is the concept of culture. I've even used that word, and it's very buzzwordy. And something too that when I'm working with coaches and doing, coaching education, is trying to help them rethink what the concept of culture is.
Hmm.
Coaches use it very prescriptively as it currently stands. They basically say, this is our culture, and you, as the athlete, have to adhere to it. You have to assimilate. And rather than realizing that culture is defined by every single body on the team, coaches included, managers
Hmm.
included, and anytime you subtract or add a person, the culture changes. Because
Yeah.
culture is actually made up of the demographics, the very unique and valid and respectable demographics of everybody on that team. So it's not prescriptive. It's very much a revisiting what the culture is, letting the athlete's voice dictate what that culture is, and
Yeah.
figuring out as a team what the culture is for that season, for the semester, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and making sure that all lived bodies, that we are born into a culture, right? Like I was
Yeah.
born in the state of Alabama in a
Yeah.
religious culture in a Southern Baptist church.
Yeah.
Some of these things I don't necessarily adhere to anymore, but those things did inform how
Yeah.
I view confidence as a woman, for example.
Hmm.
And so if a coach doesn't understand how culture informs a person's psychology, then a coach might be getting mad at an athlete because they're not adhering to their own explicit bias of what the coach thinks confidence is. So
Right.
they might be prescribing and diagnosing an athlete as not confident, when in reality, you have to understand that, to use me as an example, I was raised in a Southern Baptist church where women are told to be submissive and,
Right.
to men specifically, we're not supposed to be in leadership positions, we're supposed to be modest. So if I have a coach coming in wanting me to take leadership role, that might
Yeah.
feel like a perversion to me.
Right.
And so when coaches come in, they throw out culture, 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 and they're not realizing there's a lot of nuances there. Then they
Yeah.
oftentimes minimize an athlete, and that athlete might not feel seen by the coach. And
Right.
um, so that's another thing from this book that I really promote is us
Yeah.
really getting in and thinking about these buzzwords we use and not using them so frivolously or prescriptively.
Yeah. Not feeling seen was a common thread, I think, in the second set of letters.
Yeah.
That that was a common theme of they needed that relationship. They needed that to be seen and heard. And anyway, there's so many different factors in it, but I really loved this book, and I thank you so much for talking to me, and thank you for your patience with the
Yeah.
scheduling and with this goofy internet and with all of it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, as always, that's life. Life's a little goofy,
It
like it
is
doesn't go
sometimes,
unhitched and it's just about how we roll with the punches. So I think
right?
it's very poetic almost how all of this has happened.
Absolutely. When do you think your book's going to come out? Anytime, like, is it going to be a while or your second
This
one?
book, the
The
second
second
one,
one.
it might, I'm not actually sure. I'm still, 5.5 months out from this surgery, so I'm getting
You're
my
taking
feet
your
under
time.
me. Yeah,
Yes.
I had to take some time off work. Thankfully, I had
Sure.
some supportive boss and colleagues. So I'm just now actually getting integrated back into teaching and
Yeah.
juggling that. And my transplant team told me they were like, it's really a solid year before your
Wow.
body
I believe
spans
it.
out. Yeah, so and thankfully I was fairly healthy prior, so I
Right.
do feel great. But I've something I learned from this surgery was I used to be very kind of type A and very like my worth is attached to productivity. And
Right.
when you go through a major life thing like this, it's really, I'm kind of in that type B space now.
Yeah.
I'm realize, and I'm having to decode myself from this, and I learned it as an athlete, right? If you're not getting
Yeah.
1% better every day, then what are you doing? You're lazy.
Yeah.
We're like growing up in the church, idle hands are the devil's playground, so I've been working through a lot of my own shame and therapy of
Right.
like letting my body heal, having the lazy days where I'm horizontal most of the day, and I only get
Yeah.
up to go to the bathroom or eat, um, but that's actually been really healing. And
Good.
even with this book, I felt like, gosh, this book was published in 2021, and it's not the goals I set for it didn't get accomplished, and needing to just let those go.
Right.
So it's really taught me with book two, like, I do believe there will be a day in time where I start getting that motivation and it'll come about, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah. Good. Well, I will follow you on social media. I try to follow all my
Yeah,
guests, but I'll follow you because I want to keep
please
up with
do.
it because I
Please
definitely
do.
would like to get that one. So Well,
Okay.
thank you so much. I hope you get
Yeah.
some rest today. Enjoy the
Yeah.
rest of your
Thank
evening
you.
and
It was
relax
good
a
to
little bit.
talk to you.
It was good to talk to you too. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
of course. Have a good one. Bye.
Okay, you too. Bye bye.